You're listening to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories and the latest information from people who fight addiction every day. I'm Mike Torville, your host and author of Voices from the Fallen. Thank you for listening, for following, and most of all, for sharing with people you care about. Make your voice count too. Hello everybody, thanks for joining us at Healing Voices Project. We're glad to have you back, and we're also glad to have our next guest here, Mark Jachym from the Springfield Comprehensive Treatment Center in Springfield, Massachusetts. Mark is a community outreach coordinator. Also, equally as important, Mark is in long-term recovery himself. Mark Jachym, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Sure, glad you're here. We've got a lot to talk about.
Yes.
Because we spent a lot of time on the phone talking about your work, your experience, your recovery, the 20 years or so of maybe 30 of heavy
and then some
use that led you to where you are.
Yes.
So we got a lot to cover here. So first, why don't we just talk about your work, and then we'll get into what got you there. So you're a community outreach coordinator.
Yes.
What does that mean? What do you do? And tell us a little bit about the Springfield Comprehensive Treatment Center.
Okay. First off, my position is part of a state-funded program for the state opioid response, grant position type thing, and it's something I think is really needed in the state. What I do is try to find what the barriers are for people trying to maybe get into treatment, any barriers that they have while they're in treatment, and how to keep it going for them.
Let's hold that thought, but
Okay.
Talk about some of those barriers. What are they?
They could be anything. Transportation to
Okay.
a treatment center,
Yeah.
an ID, insurance, things of that nature. No support, no family support, no
Okay.
friend support, things of that
Okay,
like that.
yeah, that makes sense. All right. Now continue with the thought that I interrupted.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry.
So the other thing that I do is I go out on the streets and I meet folks literally where they're at.
Yeah.
A lot of times I'll get a phone call from the Springfield Police Department, Springfield Fire Department, Springfield Housing Authority, and say, hey, Mark, there's some folks or a person in such and such an area that has been unsheltered, or he's been drinking or she's been drinking in public, whatever it might be. Could you maybe go meet with them, because the police department doesn't necessarily want to bring their presence there, when it might just be somebody needs a little support.
Yep.
So I go and I meet with them, and sometimes I'm met with, oh, hi, how are you? And we can have a discussion. Other times I'm met with, I'm perfectly fine, I don't need any help.
Like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'll tell them, okay, I respect that. Here's my card. If you ever need anything in the future, feel free to reach out. And then I have other folks, because we are Springfield Comprehensive Treatment Center specializes in methadone, medication-assisted treatment. Mm-hmm. So we also have Suboxone there. However, most folks prefer that we have methadone.
Is that because it's more familiar, they don't know enough about Suboxone, or is it just because it's a preferred treatment? What makes that
it depends who you talk to.
Okay.
Some people say Suboxone makes them sick. Other people say it's better than methadone. It's a personal preference.
Okay.
Whatever works is what works.
All right. Yeah.
So, if I encounter somebody on the street who says, yeah, but Mark, I'm not using opioids, I'm drinking. Okay, I can still point you in the direction of somebody if you're looking for it.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, you know something about that.
I do.
Yeah.
Yes, that was my number one
in your
thing.
Earlier life. Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
All right, we'll get to that.
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah, and that's basically what I do. I always tell people, I'm not a salesman.
Yeah.
If you need something that we can provide, I will by all means help you out and get you in, and we'll go from there. However, there are those times where people say that's not my thing. I don't do opioids. So I can connect them with other resources should they need it or want it.
Who often, it seems like a simple question, but it just who often directs you or requests that you go to these locations? You said you get calls from the police, the fire department, others. Do you get calls directly from families? I guess that's where my question goes. Yeah.
I've gotten calls from families,
Yeah.
And I've also gotten phone calls from nurses and doctors at the local hospitals that may just be driving down East Columbus Avenue or Union Street in Springfield or in Holyoke, wherever it might be.
Okay.
Hey, I just saw somebody on the corner, or I just saw somebody that seems like they're in kind of rough shape. Can you maybe go and check on them and see if you can make a connection? 9 times out of 10, I can do it right then, and we'll see what we can do. But I get lots of everybody.
Okay.
calling.
And why I was asking that is because if a family or friends or somebody sees that somebody's having some difficulty, needs some help, needs some support, yours can be the first call they make.
Right.
Okay. And with that, mention the website and the phone number, so if somebody wanted to reach you, I have it in front of me, I might as well say it.
Yeah, go right ahead.
The number, this is for the Springfield Comprehensive Treatment Center, is 413-733-3488. 733-3488. And the website, ctcprograms.com. So a quick phone call there could get to you, ask for Mark Jachym, and then you'll find a way to get there.
Yes. And also what I can do with my specific program, if I have somebody that calls and says, well, I have no transportation there, I can send an Uber. And then I also have bus passes. I have things that can assist. And then hopefully, if the individual has an address, we can set up a PT1, which is transportation provided through a doctor, from their residence to the clinic and then back to the residence.
And that next course of action would vary.
Yes.
I mean, depending on the conversation you have, how receptive they are, how willing, cooperative they are.
Right.
It would depend, and you can sort of assess at the moment what needs to happen next, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't push people. I don't make them feel uncomfortable. I
Right.
give the information that they might be needing, and I say to them, whenever you're ready. They might be ready right then, or they might take a few weeks or a few months. But as soon as they're ready, I'm available for that call.
You've opened up the door.
Yes.
Now you've been doing this work for how long now?
I've been at Springfield CTC for just under 2 years.
Okay.
And I've been working in the community as a recovery coach as well for the last 6.
Okay. Prior to that, you were a corrections officer.
Yes.
Yep. And you had a full career there.
I did. I started off at DYS in Westfield and then moved up to the Sheriff's Department and was there until 2013 when things really started to
change.
Yes.
What happened?
I had gotten arrested for an OUI. I was, everybody says you hit rock bottom. Well, my rock bottom had a basement. There were multiple arrests after that. I actually had gone to jail for a little while. I resigned my position from the Sheriff's Department to help take care of myself, which didn't necessarily work the first time or the 5th time.
But, yeah, it's not uncommon, right?
Right. And, so I have been in jail. I have been Section 35, multiple rehabs, attempted to even end my life. So there was a little stretch there from about 2013 to 2015, March 31st, 2015 was the last drink or substance, the last day I did any of that.
You were 40, mid-40s?
43. I'm sorry, 45. I was 43 when I got my first arrest and 45 when I got my last one. And there was a half a dozen in between that short time.
And 45 when you had your last drink.
Yes.
Prior to that, you started drinking when you were young.
13 years old, first real drink, other than the sips off of beers here and there that nobody saw. I don't really count. But the first time I actually
You didn't count them, but they were pretty consequential.
Yeah. And the first time I actually poured a glass of a little bit of tequila and said, I'm going to try this,
Yeah.
and didn't like the taste, but
Right.
boy, it warmed me up and felt pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the beginning.
30 years later,
Yes.
you find yourself getting arrested because you had been drinking steadily, increasingly over 30 years into in your early 40s. Now you were married before, you had a family.
Yes. I have a daughter I haven't seen in almost 9 years because of all that, and that's that is what it is.
Yeah.
I'm married to an amazingly awesome woman now. I have two fantastic stepchildren. One's 21, the other one's 17. So are they technically children anymore?
Yeah, well, yeah.
And the way things are in my life right now, I wouldn't change a thing. Even with all the negative things that happened in my past, it led
You
me
are
to,
where you are because of what you've gone through.
yes.
Yeah.
And I honestly believe that all that happened for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think maybe helping folks.
Well, certainly when relationships, whether it's a marriage, children, work, friends, they all get affected through addiction.
Yes.
And so that relationship, your marriage, dissolved after a little while. But then was that before or after you turned 43, or you had your first arrest? Was that you were still married during that time, or you had already? Okay.
No, that was all done. And it just, things snowballed and snowballed and snowballed after that.
Yeah.
My best friend, my wife Liz, without her support and my family's support, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now.
Yeah.
It's funny because she was with me when I was doing some really, really nasty things, and I was not a very nice person. And for the simple fact that I was able to get healthy and be a better person again, she stuck with me, and that made an impact on me. I mean, I don't know if I would have done that. It's very difficult to say, but without that support and I also have a very open relationship with her kids, my stepchildren, where they know what my past was like.
Yeah.
Because I also want them to know these things happen.
Learn from it. Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And if you have any questions on things, please feel free to come to me. I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm going to just tell you exactly how things are. So I can't speak highly enough about any of my people close to me. I have a great friend, Tanya, who I talk with on a regular basis. She's fantastic. So I have great supports. I really do.
What would you support? We talk about that all the time, and you can't really do this very well alone.
Correct.
Without that support, do you think you'd have succeeded, gotten through the 8 years?
Without it, no. I probably wouldn't be alive, to be honest with you. With all that, there was a time that my father passed away about 3.5 years ago now, and there was a time that our relationship was pretty rocky because of what was happening with me, and we got back to the point where things were awesome.
Yeah.
And you didn't sit there and say, I love you too. We didn't do those type of things, but the last few years, yeah, we did, and it was cool.
And back when you were going through the difficulties, you could never have imagined you would have gotten to that point. And
No, I was more content with just not talking
Yeah.
to anybody, to him, to whoever, because I know you're not happy with me, and
you stubbornly isolate yourself and say this is
exactly.
Yeah. Now, you said you'd hit rock bottom, and then there was a basement to rock bottom, and
Yes.
we talked on the phone the other day about your experiences, which is pretty emotional, what you had gone through. Let's talk about what you'd gone through with your arrest. You ended up spending time in jail, which, was it the jail you worked at?
No, it was not.
Okay.
I ended up going up to the jail in Northampton.
Okay. All right. But spending time in there, sometimes that snaps you out of it. Of course, you're not able to drink in jail.
No. I was there for 5 months, and the night I was released, I was drinking that night. There was a bottle of wine that was left over in my apartment. It was one of those bottles that a friend gave me years ago. It was like $3.99. It was a joke, and it was in my house. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna drink it. And I was back on and running again,
just like
right
that.
after getting out of jail. And things just again started to snowball,
spiral out. Right.
Yep.
Did you have a job? How did you work through this?
So I did not have a job for quite a while after I left the sheriff's department in 2013. I was going to treatment. I was trying to take
care of yourself.
Yes,
Yeah.
And then I was unemployment. I was collecting for a little while, and it just nothing was really working for me. Nobody wanted to hire me because I had fresh charges.
Yeah.
And they all, I don't know, maybe it was because they in the interviews I wasn't doing
never
a very
really
good job.
outright told you so, but
Yeah.
you kind of knew that was the case.
Yes.
And then did you get arrested again?
I got arrested a couple more times after that, and actually there were two of them in the same week, March 24th of 2015 and March 31st of 2015.
A week apart?
Yes.
Wow.
Yep.
It's hard to do.
And both times I woke up in the same holding cell in Agawam. Not the greatest thing when you wake up on a concrete
Did
slab.
you
and
like
woke
it so
up.
much you wanted to go back?
No, not so much. But I don't even remember where I was arrested when the police got me. I know I was somewhere in Feeding Hills. I just don't know the exact location. So things were pretty bad. But on a positive note, that second arrest on March 31st, I was laying there and said to myself, this is it. I can't do this anymore. I need to just end it. And I attempted. And thankfully, before it happened, I started saying, I had second thoughts, and I said, oh my gosh, I have to stop this. I have a daughter that I don't want to do this to. I have a family that I don't want to do this to. I just can't. I don't want to die.
How close did you come?
So I had I don't want to get too graphic, but I did, have a shirt around my neck, and I was feeling pretty lightheaded. I think I was about to get to the unconscious stage. And
You were already starting to feel the effects.
I was,
Yeah.
and I could feel it, and I started to panic and said, no. And thankfully I could undo the knot that I made. And I decided at that point, after I sat up and gathered myself, I said to the officer, I need to make a phone call. And the officer said, Mark, it's 4:21 in the morning. Who's going to answer your phone call?
You're
I
one person. Right?
Yeah, and I said, my mother.
Yeah.
And I did. I called, and my mother answered on the first ring, and I think she must have known.
She kind of knew it might be you?
Yep.
Yeah.
And, so long story short on that, I did speak to her and my father, and they both said, what do you need from us? And I said, could you please meet me at Westfield District Court tomorrow morning, because I think I might not be seeing you guys for a while after this. I just had a feeling with the amount of times I was in front of Judge Content in Westfield.
You knew the...
I think he was done with seeing me, and I figured I would be gone for a little while. And they said, sure. So the next morning, we went to Westfield District Court, and I had an absolutely amazing attorney named Kathleen Kavanaugh, who actually has one of the biggest hearts in the world. And she brought up the idea of a Section 35 to my parents, and they said, how do we do it? And so that ball got rolling, and I met with the court psychiatrist, told her everything I had been through, everything I was doing, what happened 6 hours prior. And
now, before that, well, first, explain what Section 35 is so everybody understands what that is and how that...
So a Section 35 is an involuntary commitment. Usually what happens is when family or doctors or even police officers think that somebody's in danger of harming themselves or even others, they can go to the judge and request a Section 35, which you're then sent to. Now they have Plymouth Sheriff's Department, Hamden County Sheriff's Department has a Section 35. I was sent down to Brockton, the Men's Addiction Treatment Center. I could not leave. I had to finish the.
But the alternative was worse.
The alternative was going to jail.
Right.
And I didn't want to die. I didn't want to go back to jail. But I knew at that same point I was done. After what happened the night before, I was done. So I didn't put up a fight when my attorney and
you
my
just
parents,
resigned yourself to say, my old life has to be over.
Yes. And that's basically exactly what went through my head is I can't do this any longer. That has to be a part of my past.
Sort of like saying, I'm defeated here. So
I was ultimately defeated.
Yeah. But there had to be something, okay, now a little scary.
Yep.
So you went through the Section 35, you were there for how long?
23 days.
23 days. Got out. And recovery's not easy.
Correct.
Let's talk about some of the challenges you had during recovery. Now you've been at 8 years now, so what you've done has worked. But you've had some difficulties and challenges through that time, right? What's the hardest difficulties or challenges you had to overcome?
I'll be honest. Not seeing my daughter really affects me, but I've also resigned myself to the fact that that may happen down the road. I can't keep harping on that because that was a very unhealthy thought. I've had my father passed away, my grandfather passed away. I've had melanoma diagnoses and removed from so I've had cancer scares, things like that, and I've never gone back. I've never once had I'll be honest with you, never once have I had an urge to have a drink.
No relapses at all?
Nothing. I don't even do mouthwash with alcohol in it. And, it's just, things were to that point where, nope, I can no longer do any of this. I don't smoke marijuana. No mind-altering substances. Caffeine, I don't really count in there because I don't drink a ton of coffee either. But it's, I really believe that I knew that night I was done. I had to change. And I have. I don't want any part of that life ever again. And to be honest with you, a lot of what I do on the streets and meeting with people, I've had folks ask me, are you sure this doesn't trigger you? I don't like that word very much, but this doesn't trigger you to want to go back out and do I said, no.
Just the opposite?
Just the opposite. Because I see folks and I look back and go, that was me at one point, and I don't want that ever again.
I think it'd be a constant reminder to you, and almost in a way that may help you.
Yes.
Yeah, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I used to do all kinds of things. I was walking quite a bit way at the beginning of my recovery because I just couldn't sit still. I had to get out and do something. And then after a couple of months of my sobriety, I went out and I got a job. I got hired by this amazing woman, Amy Conklin, at the Mental Health Association. Amy allowed me to, show myself to some folks and see what I could do. And next thing you know, they wanted to pay for my certification for a recovery coach if I was interested. So I jumped on that opportunity.
And you were all into that.
I was.
Yeah.
And at first I was kind of like, meh. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? This is really cool.
That's why I thought, because at first you might have said, whoa, wait a second. And you always got to think back and say, if I'm going to be a recovery coach, you could never have seen that coming.
No. If you would have told me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, prior to all that this is what I was going to be, I would have laughed at you and I would have said, you're out of your mind.
Yeah, but here you are.
Here I am.
Yeah.
And I've met some really great people along the way.
Yeah.
People I've worked with and people who are struggling and people who are in recovery. I love it. I was telling somebody earlier this morning that a lot of times I would rather have conversations with those folks than some of the people I used to have conversations with because they're just more real.
Mm-hmm. You can certainly relate to what they're going through. And that recovery coach job led to where you are now. How did that change and transpire?
Well, in between I had worked at Friends of the Homeless. Another really good friend of mine, Christina Ruest, got me a job there. She was phenomenal.
Yep.
And she got me there. Things were great. And this opportunity popped up. Mm-hmm. Another individual, Aaron Belisle, my director, who I had been friends with in my prior life as well. And she saw this opportunity and said, you know what, I think this kind of has your name all over it if you want to apply. So I did. I applied for it and did the interview, and I got it. And because she knows what I've been through. So
Yeah.
I think she also appreciates the fact that I'm not just a person occupying a seat. I'm actually looking to try to help somebody.
Yeah.
You know?
Somebody that can be effective, because you can certainly understand where people are at.
Yes.
And maybe say something that resonates with them.
Right. And you know, the really cool part of some of my days is a lot of the folks already know me. And they come in and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad to see you here.
Yeah.
So it kind of relieves them a little bit that, you know, they're not coming into a new place where they're like, oh, all these people are going to tell me what to do. They're going to make me do this. And then they just say, can I talk to you every so often? Absolutely. You know, I don't, whatever people say to me in my office stays in my office. And I think they really appreciate that.
Yeah. When you were going through your recovery initially, especially, did you go into any other type of rehab or follow a 12-step program? What kind of program or techniques worked for you?
Originally, 12-step program is where I tried. I went to a lot of exercise. I went to the gym. I did a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
But mostly I just tried to be around people like me.
Yeah.
You know, that were no longer drinking, no longer doing any drugs, nothing like that. And a lot of them were people I already knew, whether it was from school or neighbors or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So it was really kind of like, wow, this isn't going to be so bad, I don't think. And now I don't focus on any type of recovery. I just do a little bit of everything. Like Bruce Lee says, absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, and make and use what is uniquely your own, right? So I just do whatever I can. And I have enough of, again, my supports. I can't speak highly enough about any of them. I can go home to my wife and say something any time I want, and she'll listen. I can call my friend Tanya. I can call Chris. Anybody. It's fantastic. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I go.
And you know, I think we talk about that a lot. The ability to get support is so critical, especially, you know, now that we're past COVID, sort of.
Yes.
90% past COVID. Anyway, that isolation is starting to change, because through that isolation, I think that was detrimental to a lot of people's recovery. The support, they couldn't meet with people, and certainly you saw the results of that.
Right.
Now, through the few years you've been doing this now, you seeing a change now through that, or?
You know what? I honestly think that things are getting better now that folks are able to sit face to face again instead of Zoom or on the phone.
Yeah.
That is not the best way to do your treatment for whatever. The only thing I have noticed is that I think that the mental health aspect of some folks, because of going through all that, has gone down, and got to try and figure out how to build that back up.
Yeah. The other thing that's changed is there's all kinds of, the use of fentanyl has changed over the years. It's not just heroin anymore.
Right.
Fentanyl, and also you've got other drugs mixed in there that are fatal, that sometimes are resistant to other treatments, like Narcan and other things. But you see a lot of changes over the last few years.
Yes. Fentanyl is, I tell people, just think fentanyl is in everything that you're getting off the street. It's probably 95% of everything, but you know, you have to just imagine that it's in there. There's also xylazine, which is an animal tranquilizer.
Right.
That extends the high of the opioid that you're taking. So people are, you know, it's not just a couple hour thing. This may be 3-4 hours, whatever.
Get a bigger bang for your buck, I suppose.
Exactly.
However, I've been told that it's resistant to Narcan.
Yes. It's not an opioid, so it won't work. Just
it's a tranquilizer, isn't it?
Yes, but that's not part of the opioid family. So if somebody is having an overdose with fentanyl and with xylazine, you will have to use the Narcan, but you also will have to use, you know, your CPR, the chest compressions, rescue breathing, that type of stuff. So Narcan will not. I've seen that a lot where people are like, well, it doesn't work on xylazine. Well, that's because xylazine's not an opioid.
And here's the part that no one knows.
Right.
Xylazine was in this. So you could do Narcan, and if it's not working, you have to think it could be because of xylazine in there. And you're seeing an increase of use of that?
Yes. Along the East Coast, it's pretty rampant, Philadelphia especially, but in our area, you can go to drugsdata.org and type in Springfield, Mass, Holyoke, Mass, Greenfield, whichever, and you'll see what substances have been tested and what was in them.
What was that website again?
Drugsdata.org.
Drugsdata.org, okay.
And xylazine is in quite a bit.
Yes, I've been reading quite a bit about this,
Yes.
and it's increasing quite a bit, and it's deadly.
And yes, and there's the wounds that people get from it are, if you read it in the paper, they call it a zombie drug and all this. There's no such thing as a zombie drug. Okay, it's just things that it's making people really, really incoherent and possibly die.
Right.
But some of the wounds that they get are so brutal that there's amputation that may be involved.
And that's why I said it's deadly. Fentanyl's deadly. It's all deadly.
Yeah.
But to this point, because it's not easily detected at first, and therefore the treatments that people think will work won't. And then you get all these side effects, like you said, the sores and everything else that could happen from it.
Yeah. And there's so much misinformation about fentanyl and xylazine and just the drug supply in general that there's, unfortunately, people hear these stories and believe them and they don't want to help anymore. Yeah. They're like, I'm not going near that person. They did fentanyl. I'm now going to have an overdose. Even though fentanyl, you cannot have an overdose on fentanyl unless fentanyl gets into your system. Like if there's a pile,
it's not airborne.
No.
Yeah, right.
and if it is airborne, you would probably need a massive wind tunnel with tons of it to even possibly have that. If we have, not that we're ever going to do that, but if there was a pile of fentanyl right here and we just looked at it, nothing's going to happen to us.
No, but I also know with the police, if they're going into a place where fentanyl is used, they need to kind of suit up because it could accidentally get on their hands. And if they wipe the node out, it could be ingested somehow accidentally.
The thing with that is it would have to be a very large amount.
Okay.
And, I do speak with Westfield Police, Springfield Police. Yes, always have your gloves on.
Mm-hmm.
Always.
Yeah.
But there's this thing called the nocebo effect. The nocebo effect is if you think something is going to hurt you, it's going to. So if you automatically go into a situation and think that fentanyl is going to really, really do some damage on you, you're going to think so, and you may have a reaction. It's usually a panic attack type of a thing.
So a self-fulfilled event there, yeah.
Yes. And, what we try to do is there's a handful of us that try to just get that information out that's correct. Mm-hmm. And I had one person tell me, well, this person went to taste the fentanyl or taste the substance, and I was like, well, that's intentional.
Yeah.
That's not accidental. You're intentionally doing something. So your best bet is to just not touch things.
Why would you?
Yeah. But there's a lot of misinformation. The Hampton County Addiction Task Force, we have those meetings once a month.
Yep.
We try to get those really great information. The great people in to get some good information out there. Mm-hmm. So
that's where we met.
Yes.
And you're right. I've just gotten to get involved with that group, and there's some great people in there, and a lot going on, and learned a lot.
Yes.
In the few months.
Yeah, it's really great.
Yeah.
It's a great thing that the DA's office and the sheriff's department do.
Yep. Yeah, it's great. Well, Mark, I appreciate. There's a lot of information that you shared, both professionally and personal, and I appreciate that very much.
No problem.
And if anybody wants to find out more, Springfield Comprehension Treatment Center, ctcprograms.com, and the phone number there is 413-733-3488. And again, Mark, thanks and for coming on. I'm gonna give you a copy of my book,
Awesome.
Voices from the Fallen.
All right, thank you.
And
Appreciate
I think that in fact, I'm gonna give you two.
All right.
How's that? Bonus.
Awesome. Thank you. My wife can get one now too.
Yeah, and share with people, and that's why I wrote it, because it certainly has 8 different stories of people who, like what we've discussed, with all different causes, effects, and outcomes, that I think hopefully it's relatable, and that was the whole point.
Awesome.
So I appreciate your work, you being here. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, and thanks everybody for joining us here. See you all soon. Thanks.